Hey friends, and welcome. It's tier list time. We're going to look into the Materium Tomes, the ones we see here. Which of these are just generally strong, which are quite weak and barely make it into any build at all, and what does the community say in general? I've watched a lot of other tier lists. I've played this game for a long time now. Why do my opinions sometimes differ from what some other tier lists you might have been looking at? Let's get into it. First things first, we start with the tier 1 tomes, the Rock, Enchantment, and the new Discipline and Alchemy tome. For the Rock tome, I think this is way better than the community seemed to think. I've seen some other other tier lists where they rank this to be either a B tier tome or even a C tier tome, and with comments like, yeah, the spells aren't that great, the units aren't that great. This I agree with. Maybe the Stone Spirit could be quite good, considering he turns into a tier 3 Stone Spirit eventually. But I do rank this tome high for three reasons, and it's the province improvement, it's the minor race transformation, and the unit enchantment. The unit enchantment is one of the few things that applies to both melee and ranged, and that makes it a really good pickup if you're looking to spam skirmishers, inquisitors or something like that, where this applies to everything they do. You might also run a build that is quite heavily on the physical damage side, and you're sundering a lot of armor already. Then a physical damage enchantment is good. So in general, I would say this is stronger than most of the unit enchantments in the tier 1 out of the tier 1 tomes. And then regarding the Earthkin race transformation, people are saying the camouflage isn't that useful, neither is the mountain walk. Usually it's just you're gonna be walking around the mountains anyway, even though you might have this activated. That I agree with as well. It's less useful than you think. It might happen once or twice, or a game that you might actually take your armies and move them over a mountain. But I really like it for the 1 defense. One thing that you need to understand in this game is how good it is to stack defense, to make it the difference between having 8 defense and 10 defense is quite a lot. And let's see here, actually there was a Reddit post 2 years ago from today stating what I have here on the left side, and I checked and it's still true, and that's how this game works. So there's a label that some people call effective HP, and what that means is the actual amount of damage the enemy would need to do in order for them to kill your unit. So for example, I took the example here, if you have a unit with 100 hit points and they have a 19% damage reduction, the enemy would need to do 123 damage in order to kill your unit. So what we see here is there's a trend where if you increase your defense, you're not only, yes, you're getting less and less damage reduction, you see here, but the effective health, and that's what really matters. That's the amount of damage they need to do to kill your unit. That gets better and better. So if we take a look at the 10 here, you see here, they would need to do 287 damage to kill your unit that has 10 defense and 100 in health. You could expect there to be 200, considering at the first level it's only 10%, but it's all the way to 287. So stacking defense in this game is great. So because of that, if you're running a defensive build, Tome of Rock is really good. It's the only enchantment that gives you defense as the first tome, and it gives you a really good unit enchantment, and it gives you a quarry that interacts with other quarries And I also really like that, because you're going to be seeing later in this video and in other videos in the future that a lot of good tomes in the beginning of the game have quarry province improvements. So you might pick up like maybe 3 out of your first 4 tomes have a good quarry, and thus having them interact with each other is really nice. So for this reason, I've seen other tier lists where they rank the Tome of Rock either to be a B or a C tier. They say, it's not very useful. I disagree. I think it could be S, but no, I think it's better suited in the A tier category. It finds its way into many of my builds. I've tried to replace this and put something else in there, but I end up just saying, Tome of Rock is simply better. So I rate it as an A tier. Moving on. Tome of Enchantment, another really good tome that has been buffed in the sense of that its Sundering Blades always occur, and that's extra important for something that removes status resistance. Before I think it was 90% chance of landing, and if you were punching an enemy with like 13 status resistance, chances are you're not going to be able to even reduce their status resistance, and thus you can't do much else. No effects. But really great. You now have a really sure way, or you have a really sure way to reduce their status resistance, which is great. Also, you get another unit enchantment affecting shield units. So if you're doing a shield unit spam build, this tome is, in my opinion, I'm going to spoil it a little bit now, but I'm going to be placing this tome into the S tier, and that is because it's just the best tome if you're going shield spam, and that's because a lot of the newer tomes have bonuses that gets them into defense mode automatically, so you don't even have to spend your action putting your units into defense mode. And so this enchantment just improving your defense mode and also giving 1 resistance. We just talked about the importance of stacking defense and resistance, so the fact that this gives that improves something that your units will be automatically put in quite a lot, especially for shield unit builds. And then the Sundering Blades setting up the rest of your tomes really well, where you're able to remove up to 10 status resistance, more or less guaranteeing after a while that your cool stuns or effects like that happen. Amazing. Once again, you see here we have another quarry that interacts with other quarries, which I like. I like the combination of that. So I like 3 things really well in this tome. The Awakened Tools is not worthless, but it's difficult to find the use for. I like to put it down when I see that my city has just moved into a negative state, and thus a little bit more of negative city stability won't affect it even further. Instead, then it's just a free 20 protection, 20 drafts. But all in all, just an okay spell. And when it comes to ranged builds, I probably won't pick this tome up. Maybe if you find a nice hybrid build between defenders and skirmishers or rangers, this could be useful, this purging arrows. But in general, I still put this in S tier, and that's because I find defensive builds to be strong due to the fact with the increased resistance, due to the fact that we have a lot of healing now with some newer tomes in the game. And I think defenders have been getting some love, and I think this tome is just so good for those builds. So that's where it lands for me. Moving on, we're gonna take a look into the Tome of Alchemy. What do we have here? We have a tome that gives us a little bit of knowledge from the SPI, We have a building working really well in a magic material build. Those are fun. There are some things you can do. You can pick your society trait to be focused on magic materials. You could pick some other tomes in the future, such as, I'm going to spoil it a little bit here. If you pick the Tome of Transmutation, you can make this transmutation circle. You can really make a build around magic materials that is quite good, but mostly really fun. And then this tome is of course a must-have for that build. That makes it okay, quite good. If it's the clear winner in some specific build, it's by definition a good tome, I would say. But in general, I don't like this tome. I think the siege project is weak. I would more or less don't want to research this. I would rather just use the default siege projects, since it's just a tier 1 siege project. I don't like the afflictor. It's a tier 2 archer that gets beaten by other soldiers quite soon. Better to just try to make tier 3 units instead, quicker. The buff spell, I'm not... the spells in general I'm not very impressed by, neither the unit enchantment. I guess quite good. Switch out the negative to a positive trait. But in general, I do not find this tome to be very useful in many builds. I would probably just pick this tome if I'm doing some magic material shenanigans. For that reason, I am only gonna give it a B tier. I can't give it a C or a D tier because it's still one of the better tomes in a magic material build. Tome of Discipline. Here I differ from the community as well. I think I've seen some comments, I've seen some tier list videos ranking this quite low. They say stuff like the stun here will barely occur, considering it needs to attack 3 times in order for it to happen, and they don't like the monk and so on, and they think the monastery is just decent, if even that, as a building. I disagree. I have ranked this an A tier. I've ranked this as an A tier tome. And that's because I find this to be the strongest pick for certain builds. For one thing, I mentioned a little bit before, we have quite a few options regarding healing now in the game. We have the grace mechanic giving more healing and so on. And way back, the plant people also got a 20% extra healing. We've also seen that the undead build has been a little bit better because we have some extra tomes helping you out if you're doing the undead morale debuffing build. And if you didn't know, the undead are healing for each strike they do. So I would say this is more useful than ever. The fact that you're getting more healing out of everything you do, 20%, and an extra status resistance is always welcome. So the inner mastery, I think, is a very good race transformation, specifically because it's just a tier 1 race transformation. I think it's very good for that. And when it comes to the other enchantments here, I also did a ranged build recently. You can check one of my other videos that has this tome and the focus aim. And if you're doing a ranged build, you really want to use your range to your advantage. You want to stay back. You want to make sure the enemy can't reach you, but you can reach them. So positioning at the max range and still be able to have 100% hit rate with the focused aim is valuable to me. And yes, the empowered strike's stunned ability is very, very strong, especially in the early game when people do not have status resistance. And if you compare this to like Tome of Enchantment, where you're able to reliably remove their status resistance, I think the Tome of Discipline gets really good. I have found that this tome makes it into a few of my builds. So for that reason, I'm picking it into putting it into the A tier. Now for some level 2 tomes. Dungeon Depths. The community is saying underground builds are still not that good, and thus this tome only working with underground. Even though it's a good tome, they can't rank it that high, considering underground isn't where it's at right now. However, we see here that this unit enchantment here, you see it's doing, while you're above ground, 10 damage. 10% extra damage, and then there you have some cool bonuses underground as well. But this is a really useful enchantment that is useful in every build. Every build appreciates this. Let's take a look at some units here. You know, we have, for example, the industrials units. We have a bastion here. He's making a defensive sweep. If you look toward the bottom there, it just says melee. It doesn't say base melee. And that means most of unit enchantments do not apply to his defensive sweep. And same thing if we're looking at, if we like the spider mounts. Let us take a look at those as well. If we appreciate the spider mounts, we can see the same thing with their web ability. It's not a base physically ranged ability, it's just a ranged ability. But here we go. When it comes to the Tome of Dungeon Depths, this does improve these units. So if you're doing a build with spider mounts, bastion, other units that have these abilities that don't necessarily always get buffed by unit enchantments, if you pick your tomes correctly, you might pick Tome of Seal is another example of something that applies to these units, and the Raiders of the Deep. You can really make some cool builds, and this is improving your underground by a lot. So as long as you have like 1 or 2 cities in the underground, I would still consider this tome to be good. I wouldn't say it's an S tier tome. Where is the Tome of... Yeah, here it is. There, I barely saw it. But I do place it in the A tier. I think this enchantment is just so useful. Knowledge is also very appreciated, and chances are you might end up with a city or 2 in the underground, and then this is helpful. Yeah, even in a non-underground build that focuses on constructs that these provinces improvements are helping you with, even in a normal build, I might consider picking this up. That's how good it is. Over to the Tome of Winds. This is a ranged tome. It gives you a good unit and unit enchantment and a few spells. No SPI. The Zephyr Archer got a buff, and quite a large one at that, in my opinion. First of all, it's a unit with 40 movement speed. Usually archers have 32. That's great already. The fact that he's able to keep up if you're running cavalry, or if you have skirmishers that are usually 40 movement speed. Really nice, actually, because usually when you're going rangers, you might want to pair them with a skirmisher or 2. So the fact that these are able to keep up, good. But most of all, the Zephyr shot was buffed. It now says base there if you read toward the bottom. That means almost every enchantment will apply to this. Now, it wasn't before. And that matters more than you think, because this hits in an AoE, you know. It hits adjacent enemies. So if you did pick up the Tome of Rock, for example, earlier, we will apply bleeding to maybe 3 or 4 units with the Zephyr Archer. Nice. So the Zephyr Archer is a good unit now, in my opinion, or at least decent. Not a bad unit that it was before. And you have a nice unit enchantment with extra range. Also very valuable if you're running only rangers and skirmishers. The spells aren't worthless. You have a nice anti-range ability here, where you're able to remove a lot of the enemy's accuracy. You have favorable winds ability, just giving you some extra movement on the map. That's okay. And you have an ability to more or less, you could read this as kill one enemy unit, because that's more or less what it is sometimes. If you can't reach the enemy and they can't reach you, you can put down this spell, and thus all of your units can now reach one of their units, and you just focus fire and kill that straight away. Quite good for 15 mana ability, I would say. But yeah, this is only a useful tome for ranged builds in general, and even then it might not always win over the other tier 2 tomes that are available. You might have a nice range build without this tome, and for that reason it's quite niche, and it's not a staple in every range build. So I will only be placing it into the B tier. It lacks, it doesn't have a SPI, it doesn't have that many things I like, unfortunately. But nice tome, it's still a B tier. Let's move on. Tome of Artificing. It was a little bit nerfed. It used to be 30% crit chance, now it's 25%. But the community in general says this is a good tome. It got a nice mine that interacts with adjacent quarries. Chances are you picked up a few quarries in the tier 1 tomes. It's got alternatives for siege defense and an alternative for siege offense. It has in my opinion, crappy unit. I don't like this golem. He's just focused on defense. His whole shtick is he should put himself into defense mode, because then he has a lot of bonuses. But he's not a form unit, so he doesn't get your race transformations. He's very slow. In general, I usually there are so many good other defensive shield units that do have your race form, so don't find a lot of reason to pick him. But the unit enchantment is great. There's a great golem. You have some alternatives for siege. But yeah, it has a little bit too little to be picked in many builds, I feel like. The only time I bring this tome is if I really appreciate the crit chance. So for example, if I'm playing the barbarians and I get bonus damage from making a critical hit, then it's very important for me to have critical hit chance, and then I might pick it up. But I think it's a little bit too empty comparison to other tier 2 tomes, so I only place it in a B tier. Moving on, we can go to Tome of the Construct, and here's a little bit why I placed the last tome in the B tier. Here is an S tier tome, in my opinion. This is just so great. Look at what we get here. We get a very good SPI that's just very easy to place down. It gets a bonus wherever it is. It's just so good, the SPI. I really like the transformation and the unit enchantment. Unit enchantment is 1/1. We'd explained earlier in this video the importance of stacking defenses. This is helping you out in that department a lot. Immune to flanking, why not? And this sets us up to get these all other bonuses due to being linked mines. And the spells, the 2 spells you get, I think is really, really good. I think they can contest even in the late game. I might run these once in a while. Hastened, strengthened, you're put into defense mode. There are a lot of good things affecting defense mode. So yeah, great spells, great unit enchantments. It's just, this is something that is valuable for every build that uses any of these units. So for that reason, I think this is a clear S tier. It's just auto include if you have roughly these units in your build. And for the last tier 2 tomes, we're going into the Tome of Shades. I have really tried to make this work. I want to love this tome. I I have looked at what it does. It's all revolves around the blind mechanic. And what the blind does, it's helping you a little bit versus ranged units. But most of all, it does remove retaliation attacks, which it's not very useful if you're running charge units because they're already doing that. And it's not very useful if you're running ranged units because they don't care about retaliation attacks because they're striking the enemy at range. So this is only relevant for shield units or polearm units. Sorry for taking some time there. And for those builds, we just have so many other good options. And this is a lot of ifs and buts here. First, we need to blind them, and in order for us to blind them, they need to first attack us, and then we might blind them, and after a while we can eventually ignore some of 50% of their defense and resistance. This is great, but yeah, there's a couple of ifs and buts before we're able to do that. Also, the city structure here makes sense to be in like a tier 4 tome, according to me, not a tier 2 tome. This early in the game, you probably won't have any enemy cities that border your city. No SPI. The shade is decent, but there's another skirmisher that is really great, according to me, and the Inquisitor. So unfortunately, I have really struggled to find any build that would like to have this tome. Please mention in the comments, but I have to place it quite low. I have to place it in the C tier. If the tome doesn't fit into any build, it is not a good tome. If other tomes are always better, I have to place it in a low ranking, unfortunately. Moving on, tier 3 tomes. We're starting strong with the Tome of Transmutation. You get, according to me, one of the strongest SPIs in the game. Magic materials give you a bonus to your empire once you unlock them, and this allows you to choose whichever one you want. So not only are the effects strong, giving you stuff like more draft or could give you map casting points and so on, very strong bonuses, but you get to pick exactly the one you need. This interacts well with, it's just a really good SPI. We got some really good bonuses here with the steel skinned. Once again, if you're going defense, you might want to stack those defenses to get that more effective health we spoke about during the first minute of the video. The adaptive armor. We've seen some builds really like to prolong the fights. The morale reducing build has been getting some buffs lately due to some extra tomes being available to them. And those builds, they generally just want to stick around for long enough to rout the enemy by removing their morale. And so all these builds that want prolonged fighting, adaptive armor is great. Once per turn, this can kind of just keep happening. Really good. Melt armor I appreciate as well. Not only removing some resistance, the defense, but to start a fight with just removing 3 status resistance from everyone. It's just a nice ability. Also quite a lot of damage. Transmuter and this sustained city spell I haven't found that much use of. Is the usually if I go mages, I might not go this deep into the Materium tree, but yeah, overall this tome I think is an easy S tier. It just fits in so many builds. The bonuses it gets are just always very useful. Even if you're running a very damage focused build, you still don't want to get one shot. So just picking up this one defensive option is still very good. Nice. Let's move on. Let's talk about the Tome of Terramancy. The community don't like this tome. They say it's weak. I agree, unfortunately. Excavated leyline, nice. It's one of the few things giving you world map casting points. That's nice. And this leyline focus have the crazy potential to be the strongest unit enchantment in the game if you play around it, but with a very negative caveat and not being able to move. You have to design your whole build around this to make it work, and you could. I haven't found it to be that strong anyway. I found other mages builds to be stronger, and that's what it does really. It has one good AoE spell and one good single target spell. But if you look here, 30 damage, 1 hex, inflicts slowed. If you just wait for one more tome, you can keep that in mind, 30 damage, same damage, slowed as well, but they are immediately set on fire. That will occur regardless of their status resistance, and the ground will be on fire. They will have to walk through the fire, and it's in a 2 hex line, a 2 hex radius. That's a huge difference. This will probably get the whole enemy army, whereas this might get 2 or 3 units. So spells are mediocre. You really have to build your whole build around this. I don't like the siege project either. Unfortunately, this is, according to me and the community, a little bit of a weaker tome. We're going to be placing it in low B. And that's because it's still, it does have crazy potential with the ley line focus. If you're able to find a build around this, I don't really want to be placing it into the C tier. World map casting points is good. This has crazy potential. That's where it ends up. 2 more tier 3 tomes to go through. Tome of Geomancy first. No SPI. Decent building. Decent race transformation, one of the few that gives you more damage, could be relevant if you're doing a very damage oriented build. It also has a very fun enchantment with applying a status effect based on the terrain. You can combo this with one fun thing you can do is if you go Tome of the Cold Dark, and you do this spell that quickly spreads ice toward your whole realm, 2 provinces a turn, and then you might pop this down in 2 or 3 cities. Then quite soon you're going to be filling the whole map with ice and snow. And what happens then is, we were talking about the Tome of Geomancy, remember? Then this inflicts frozen, very strong. You could combine this once again with the Tome of Enchantment there to inflict the Sunder defense, and then your units are able to potentially freeze the enemy quite quickly. Has some potential, but it's doesn't have that much that I like. No SPI, just this enchantment, and the race transformation is decent. But it's in a tier 3 slot, and we have a lot of strong tier 3 tomes. I can't place this that high. It's missing an SPI. It just has more or less these 2 things that I like, and this requires you to do quite a lot of planning around it. Let's see, Tome of Geomancy. I did place it in the C tier. I see that I might be wrong here. Tell me in the comments if I'm wrong. Maybe the race transformation and the unit enchantment alone is able to bump it up a little bit, but that's where it is for now, for me. Over to our last tier 3 tome. We have Tome of the Dreadnought. It gives you a war foundry, really helping you out with construct units. 2 ranks is huge. And it gives adjacency to quarries and mines. You might have quite a few of them if you're going this deep into the Materium tree. So nice SPI, especially if you're going constructs. Warding metals. Not only is it decent to your shield units and the constructs, but it could be good to note that this is one of the few things that can buff late game units, such as the Golden Golem, for example, a tier 5 strong unit. Usually these people don't get buffed that a lot, but because this is applying to constructs, that will increase the effectiveness of this guy. And this is just a good unit in general. So this tome absolutely does have some potential in certain builds. It will be the best tome in certain builds. And I really like the overcharge ability as well. Actually, you could be running like 3 constructs and 2 support units, and then you do this ability on 2 of them straight away. This can only be done once, but then they have 50% more damage. That's huge. And as long as you pick up a lot of status resistance, you won't have to worry about being stunned. If you have like maybe you have tier 3 or 4 construct units in general, that they have quite a high status resistance, and you can pick up Tome of Sanctuary, and you can maybe become plant people and so on. You can find your ways around this, and then this is more or less what this reads is more or less 50% more damage. That's huge. And we have gotten a lot of good support units lately, so that's a viable strategy, I think. Yeah, maybe I don't need to go through everything in this tome, but these 2 things alone I appreciate and find to be a good enough reason to pick this into a tome. The spells, I find other spells are better at this point, but they're decent, and we're getting a siege project that might speed up 1 turn. The Ironclad is okay. Yeah, let's see. Where is the tier list? Here it is. I place it in very high B tier. Yeah, some builds it will be S tier, or maybe not some builds. In one very specific build, it will be S tier. You specifically have to use these 2. I think you have to have constructs and support units, in my opinion, to justify bringing this tome. But if you do, I think it's the strongest tome. Yeah, tier 3 tomes are strong in general. I don't think I can place it in an A tier. Maybe I could be placing it into an A tier. It's close. It's close. Let's move on. Now it's time for our first tier 4 tome. We have the Tome of the Golden Realm. If you unlock this tome, then that means you will have picked up a few tomes in the Materium tree already in order to even be able to reach this tome. And that means that the Bazaar of Wonders is very good. You will have a lot of province improvements and a lot of mines and a lot of bonuses related to mines. And so having another mine here is great. We get a really good race transformation. 2 resistance is amazing, better than you think, considering what I talked about early in the video there with stacking resistance and defense. Extra gold is always welcome. You get it from this spell, you get it just from the based on your population. This unit is just a good unit, and you get some shenanigans with magic materials. Although this late in the game, food and draft is not necessarily what I really appreciate. I would rather have mana or gold or something else. Yeah, I think yes, it got some good options, but nothing here is crazy bananas. It's nothing that is really a must-have for your build. This is just a good tome. You don't get a unit enchantment, you don't get a crazy good spell that is just... we're going to be seeing in the next tome here, we do get a crazy good spell, for example. So, compared to other tomes, I mean, we're going to have to look at the opportunity cost, you know. And for that reason, this is to me also just a B tier tome, and I think that will explain itself a little bit better when we look at this next tome. This next tome is Tome of the Crucible. Once again, you get a nice mine, and you get a great unit enchantment for every ranged or skirmisher build, giving not only extra damage but also a small AoE effect around. You get this spell, Lava Burst. Holy crap, I think it's very, very strong, especially in ranged builds, but it's decent in other builds as well. City structure I think is good. One of especially if you have a few people that can do ranged and magical attacks. But yeah, most of all, the Lava Burst and the Meteor projectiles and the SPI for that reason is very, very strong. This is absolutely one of the better tomes in the game if you're going a ranged build, and it's decent in a skirmisher spam build as well. I think let's see, where do we have the tier list? I think this is an A tier tome. I think this finds its way into many builds. Only 2 tomes left, guys. Thanks for sticking around so long. Let's talk about Tome of Severing. Do we see it? Yeah, sorry, it's in the end here. Tome of Severing. I really like this tome. We see a lot of strong status effects in this game. Dominate, stunned, this disrupt, for example, that we're increasing here. So with a lot of strong effects in this game, getting 5 status resistance is huge. And you might say, but it only applies to defense mode. Yes, but the defense mode is useful now, because more or less all the shield units will be put into defense mode automatically. We can take a look at that real quick. If you look at the Bastion, he enters defense mode after he uses this ability. If we take a look at where is the Paladin? If we take a look at the Paladin, after he smites, he's entering defense mode automatically. A lot of spells are entering you into the defense mode automatically. We can take a look at Tome of where is it? Tome of Glades. This aspect of the root ability places you into defense mode. So you have a lot of options in the game that just places you into the defense mode automatically. And for that reason, I think this is huge. 5 extra status resistance. And given that you play around this well, this might be more or less the first 2 turns you will place your units in defense mode, either with the unit's ability or with an extra spell, perhaps from Tome of the Construct. You know, these spells give you defensive mastery. I think this Null Shield is great. I think the Disrupting Blades is amazing. Remove all their enchantments for 2 turns. Amazing. I think the Severing Golem is good. I think the spells are decent. But no SPI. You really have to be running shield units in order for this tome to be great, I think. But if you do, I think it's up there. I think this is an A tier tome. In the right build, this is incredibly strong. Imagine there towards the late game, and then you remove all the effects. Amazing. Over to our last tome. We have the Tome of the Creator, the tier 5 tomes in the Materium tree. I think this is one of the stronger tier 5 tomes. I tend to want to rush towards this if possible as my 9th tome of the game. You get the strongest siege project in the game, according to me. A lot of fortification damage, allowing you to break down the cities quicker. And while you go into the battle, you have a lot of good bonuses. But mostly, this spell is just overpowered to me. It's just busted. It's just too strong. They should dial it back a little bit. It is quite expensive, 200 mana, 65 combat points. But yeah, first of all, the Earth Titan is just a good unit. You see here he has a huge immobilize ability in a big area of AoE, 2 hexes. He has a heavy charge strike and all this. But most of all, you're not just getting Earth Titan, you're getting something way better. You're getting him with extra bonuses here. You immediately remove all the enemy's defense mode and all the enemy's retaliation attack. And also, he's able to act exactly when he comes down and precisely where he needs to be. So usually, I mean, a strong unit like this would first need to put their actions to locate themselves to be in a good spot, but then you can't throw this out because you don't have 3 actions anymore. You had to spend a few actions on moving. But because you're able to summon him precisely where he needs to be, this Seismic Slam just gets very strong. And then you can just repeat this turn after turn. You just throw down an extra Titan. He lives forever. I think they should nerf this to be this guy is alive for 2 turns or something like that. But the fact that he's just there forever, annoying the enemy, being in their face, and yeah, very, very strong. And for that reason, I will rank this tome quite high. It has this Shaper's Touch that also affects these Earth Titans. So even if you have running a build without any elementals and constructs, this is still good because you will throw out 2 or even 3 Earth Titans every fight towards the end game. But it's still, it doesn't have an SPI. It only has 2 things really that I like. But those 2 things are incredibly strong. But I do place it in an A tier, not an S tier for that reason. Great, guys. Thanks for watching. And there's the camera. And please comment on why I'm wrong in certain aspects. Or if you say you're totally correct in your assessment so far, write that as well. You know, I'm a human. I like some appreciation. See you around. Bye-bye.